Integrating artificial intelligence into healthcare is no longer a distant possibility, but an accelerating reality reshaping the global and Indian healthcare landscape. As India's healthcare sector reaches $650 billion in 2025, AI's integration stands at the confluence of innovation and necessity. It promises to address critical challenges while creating a more efficient, accessible, and patient centric healthcare ecosystem. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I am your host, Priya Dialani. Yet, despite all these advancements, India's healthcare sector grapples with significant challenges: staff shortages, complex diagnostic processes, and uneven access to quality care. These challenges are amplified by the country's vast and diverse population, requiring scalable and innovative solutions. Let's welcome Ajay Mahipal, co founder and general partner at HealthKois, to understand why AI is the next growth engine of healthcare investing in India. Hi, Ajay, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good too. Thank you so much, Ajay. And we are really glad to have you on our podcast today, where we are going to discuss the current realities of AI in healthcare pertaining to the Indian context, and what does the future look like, and what are certain things that a leader should keep in mind while deploying these technologies in their respective healthcare organization. So let's start, by telling our listeners more about HealthKois, a very interesting name, I must say. So, our listeners would be really glad to understand more about the company.
Thank you, Priya, and a warm welcome to all the listeners. HealthKois Fund 3 is a continuing partnership with Kois, a leading global impact advisory and investment management platform with over USD 500 million AUM. Building on the legacy and our prior work at the intersection of healthcare and impact investing, we are now extending this shared mission through HealthKois to touch a billion lives. At HealthKois, we envision a future where every Indian, irrespective of income, is equipped with health awareness and has access to high quality, affordable care. We aim to improve health outcomes for over 700 million Indians who currently lack adequate access by investing in world class healthcare companies serving the 4 billion people living in low and middle income countries. We do this by backing exceptional entrepreneurs, nurturing an ecosystem of innovative healthcare solutions, and delivering top tier risk return impact performance while building purpose driven partnership with our investors. HealthKois is positioned as India's leading healthcare innovation and impact fund, investing in early growth companies, primarily Series A to C, across healthtech, medtech, life sciences, healthcare delivery, and climate health. Most of the healthcare models operate in an ecosystem we call the 4P framework of providers, payers, pharma, and patient at the fulcrum. And to navigate this, you essentially need people who are domain specialists and who've spent a lot of time in the industry building that network and sector knowledge, through which we are able to bring forth that expertise to our portfolio companies and target companies to build scalable and sustainable business models.
Great, Ajay. Really glad to understand about the organization, and I'm really glad to understand how the organization isn't just operating within the industry, but actively shaping the space by sticking to the future where you want to ensure that every individual has access to quality healthcare at affordable price rates. And I'm really glad to understand how the company is moving beyond traditional product models and positioning itself as more like an innovation and a strategic partner. And I think we are really glad to, understand about this important shift. Moving ahead, we would like to know more about you as well, Ajay. You bring over 2 decades of experience in investment management, corporate finance, and healthcare transformation. Your leadership has consistently bridged strategic vision with operational excellence, making you as one of the leading voices in healthcare investing in India. So, we would like to know more about you, Ajay. How has your journey been till date, and what triggered your interest at Health Quest, and what is your current role at the company today?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I'll try to sum this up. I'm a chartered accountant and MBA from an Institute of Management. Did my exchange at ISARE Barcelona. Since then, it's been over 21 years across corporate finance, investment banking, and investment management roles. My foray in more formally into healthcare happened about 14 years back. And over time, I've been part of India's first dedicated health tech fund. We invested in very interesting early stage health tech companies. That time, there used to be 400 health tech startups in the country about 12, 13 years back. Today, there are more than 12,000 plus health tech startups. So I've seen the whole evolution of version 1.0 to 2.0, 3.0 by different founders with different kind of business models, and how those business models have evolved. And of course, some fall by the wayside, but how some of the more formidable models have taken shape. So that has been a very exciting journey to essentially witness this whole health tech evolution in India. Besides this, of course, this got accelerated during COVID when the adoption became significantly higher. And after that, as things normalized, essentially, how did companies essentially again rewire their models to essentially, while continuing to build out digital first, also sort of in certain cases build out more phygital models to essentially gain scale. So it's been very interesting mix of portfolio companies whose journey I have seen up and close to essentially shape probably the most formidable healthcare innovation portfolio in the country today, which spans the entire healthcare value chain from diagnostics to distribution to preventive wellness to courtney care and to allied healthcare models across healthcare financing, medtech, oncology, and other spaces within the healthcare domain. Moving forward, so this I'm a partner with HealthKois, where I'm essentially overseeing a portfolio of about 7 companies in that fund and essentially providing inputs across our portfolio of 18 companies across both our funds from that platform. And then with HealthKois, of course, we are essentially raising India's largest healthcare innovation early growth platform, which would essentially be investing into Series A to Series C companies who are essentially building out disruptive models to essentially solve for affordability, accessibility, and quality of care. And they're doing so by essentially either building technology first models or technology enabled models to essentially non-linearly solve the challenges of India. As you know, in India, we are short by 1 million doctors, 2 million nurses, and 3 million beds. And to solve this linearly would require almost $100 billion plus of capex in over 10 years to essentially build this from an infrastructure standpoint. So you essentially need to look at a different lens to solve some of these challenges in a more sharper way. So I think that is what we are essentially trying to solve through HealthKois. And my role at HealthKois would span across fundraising, investing, portfolio management, and exits. And we'll continue to essentially build on that with the exceptional team around me.
Fantastic, Ajay. Thank you for sharing your journey and, of course, your role towards the company. I believe your leadership skills and the overall contributions towards the company will help shape the future trajectory of HealthKois and introduce more innovations that could help you achieve your vision scalably and sustainably. Now, coming to our Indian AI healthcare market. So it is expected to achieve higher growth momentum due to a rise in regional healthcare expenditure. Now, the Indian population currently stands at over 1.4 billion. And in addition to this, the demand for quality medical care has been on the rise over the years. The growing investments in healthcare and the emergence of several public healthcare initiatives by private companies or the government have helped improve overall regional healthcare expenditure. So, AI is already transforming healthcare globally. But why do you believe AI will be the next major growth engine for healthcare investing in India?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. I think we are seeing several structural shifts which should make AI potentially the next major growth vector in the Indian healthcare. One, of course, India has a high disease burden, and as I mentioned, we are short on doctors and specialists, and our doctor to patient ratio is among the lower compared to the developed countries, and of course, compared to the OECD standards as well. And we essentially have a natural pull for automation and decision support tools, so in which AI can essentially play a big role. Besides this, of course, all our providers, whether it's hospitals, diagnostic centers, are always seeking efficiency, shorter turnaround times, better asset utilization, more assistance to our doctors to essentially be able to better patient triaging, prioritizing work list, to essentially be able to manage the volume of patients that each of our providers and doctors are essentially catering to. So, in all of this, you see AI playing a big role in from a disease screening to a diagnosis to a disease surveillance to a workflow management. We see tremendous use cases of AI. And given that India is a value conscious but volume heavy market, you essentially need technology at its best to essentially provide an effective solution and essentially solve for these challenges. So this coupled with the Ayushman Bharat digital mission, and of course, over time, of course, today data is still fragmented largely, but over time, we think that interoperability of data will become even stronger. We should see more and more India-centric and patient data will help us come out with diagnosis tools which could essentially change the way how incidental findings or early diagnosis can essentially happen. And if that were to happen, you essentially prevent mortality, or you are able to put the patient on a treatment journey, a treatment path much earlier. So I think there are huge use cases from that perspective. Lung cancer, when detected in stage 3 and 4, has less than 25% survival rate, but if detected in stage 1 and 2, has 70% plus survival rate. So now we are seeing more and more interesting solutions coming in which you can essentially, let's say, detect lung nodules on a chest x-ray through an incidental finding. And then the patients can go in for a confirmatory test, and depending on the outcome, you could essentially, if required, be put on that treatment path. We've seen that excellent case study and use case with our portfolio company Cure.ai, which has transformed the way in terms of how screening can be done in both tuberculosis and as well as in lung cancer. So we've seen frugal innovation built out of India, and then solving not just for India, but for other LMICs and over time for developed countries as well, in terms of those solutions being ported to these countries. That is a phenomenal change that we are now seeing in India. And I think over time, this will only become stronger. And we've also seen this story replicate with our another portfolio company, Visa, where it's an AI mental health solution, which is focused around cognitive behavioral therapy. And the idea is to essentially reduce stress, depression, anxiety levels in a clinically safeguarded way by providing safe space uh, to the user, or to the potential patient. And again, the solution built out of India, currently deployed across 100 plus countries. We see a phenomenal sort of wave of Indian AI companies built frugally, now essentially taking the solutions globally. So I think all of this are positioning India in a very strong position. Besides this, of course, with the government initiative of RDIF, where they're essentially wanting to promote deep tech and R&D led initiatives by different funds, etc., plus the BIRAC grants, where they have also allocated a sum to essentially go towards AI, deep tech, and R&D. I think all of this would essentially augur well for the Indian startup ecosystem to essentially develop solutions. And as data becomes more structured and more credibly available, I think the solutions will only, the algorithms that get developed on those data points will only make the product or the technology more stronger, which can then be deployed across to essentially right from coming up with great product modules to essentially great workflow management solutions to essentially bring improvements across the healthcare value chain. And of course, we are seeing huge foray into the AI drug discovery as well. So I think AI can be a big game changer and essentially could also act as a bit of a power shifter from developed countries towards India.
Absolutely, Ajay. And I think you've shared a really interesting perspective. I think, unlike many mature markets, India still has significant gaps in accessibility, diagnostics, and clinical efficiency. So this eventually creates a massive opportunity for AI-led solutions to scale impact much faster. And also, what's fascinating is that investors today are no longer just looking at healthcare as a traditional service sector, but increasingly as a technology-driven ecosystem where, data, predictive intelligence, and automation can fundamentally reshape outcomes as well as the overall economics. And I think India's combination of talent, cost innovation, and growing digital adoption could, potentially be make India as a global innovation hub, exporting scalable solutions to other emerging markets. Moving ahead, Ajay, now hospitals are also preparing to invest billions in AI. But the path from pilot projects to system-wide implementations remains riddled with obstacles. As providers shift from experimental AI deployments to broader adoption strategies, the lack of clear evidence, standardized evaluation methods, and foundational infrastructure create significant friction. Now, many health systems are still uncertain about which tools deliver tangible value and which fail to deliver measurable outcomes. So, compared to sectors like fintech or SaaS, healthcare AI investment in India has been more matured. So, what's holding back larger flows of capital today to India's healthcare?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When you look at any AI company or technology first company, we try and look at it from three pillars. First is the IP, which is the product development stage. Then comes the adoption, especially in healthcare, where you have to run a lot of pilots with different providers to essentially find acceptance, find efficacy, and find effectiveness of the solution. And then the third stage comes of commercialization. And this tends to be a fairly long process. In terms of IP, you need, depending on what you're building out, you need different stages of clinical approvals. Like in the case of Cure.ai, they have 19 US FDA approvals. So you essentially have to track that journey, which is both time consuming and also requires a certain amount of investment to go through. So it requires a lot of patient capital. It also requires sometimes strategic support. It also sometimes requires grant funding. So all of this has to come together to first come up with a great IP or a product solution. Then comes the adoption, which essentially you need to drive it with different hospitals, with diagnostic centers, depending on, again, what your solution is. So you have to drive that, or with doctors, you have to drive your adoption with all these providers. And that also takes time and a certain go to market strategy at a certain cost for you to essentially tap all of these clientele. And then third comes your commercialization, where you start monetizing some of those successful pilots into more commercial contracts, which sometimes could be annual, sometimes could be 3 to 5 years, depending on how you are essentially shaping those. And sometimes it could be pay per use or sometimes fixed price per contract kind of a base. So that is the journey, and that's why this journey is slightly longer and requires intense commitment from the founders and from the company management. And on the investor side, it requires again patient to essentially traverse through this journey over a longer period to build a very successful scalable company. So I think that is something which we all have to be mindful of from an ecosystem perspective. Over time now, we are essentially seeing more money flowing in, as I mentioned, through RDIF scheme of government, where they've almost announced 100,000 crore to essentially go towards such initiatives. So I think now we are trying to solve for capital. We are trying to solve for some of the technologies being available, and we are trying to solve or at least motivate entrepreneurs or founders to essentially build out solutions in this space. And some of this will now hopefully unfold over next 10 years. So I think this will now start to change more dramatically in India from a next decade perspective. And because, as I mentioned, there is longer validation cycles in healthcare and AI models in specific across imaging, clinical support, etc. You essentially need to have longer time to market kind of models compared to pure software plays. Second, of course, also is that the providers tend to be highly cost conscious with fragmented ownership and limited IT budgets, especially in tier 2, tier 3 markets, which also slows down enterprise sales. And improving data access and interoperability frictions also, I think, is something which we need to solve for. While there are national frameworks, still hospitals and providers have siloed data, limited standardization, and patchy EHR as well as EMR adoption. So I think that is something which will change. And another thing is the payer pathways are not very clear in India yet. Unlike the West world, basically it's still evolving. And I think people are now looking at, besides government being funding, grant funding some of these projects, they also want government also as a customer. And because we're almost spending close to 3% of our GDP on healthcare, with over a percent plus coming in from the government spending. While the numbers are low, there is huge scope for it to go, continue to build out bigger as government continues to thrust on healthcare more. I think we only see that this should continue to now become more stronger for the Indian healthcare ecosystem. So I think as you have more reimbursement models or payer models getting strengthened, we will see more secured commercials of companies building out. And as you see more stable cash flow models, you'll see more funding chase some of these models in India. So I think as these frictions ease through clearer regulation, better digital infrastructure, and proof of ROI, the capital intensity will likely start to resemble fintech and maybe SaaS more closely.
Absolutely. And I think your response highlights something we don't often talk about enough, that healthcare innovation operates on a very different timeline compared to sectors like fintech or SaaS. And while those industries can iterate quickly and scale digitally, healthcare carries layers of responsibility, regulation, and real world impact that naturally can slow down the investment velocity. So I think, it's that we need to raise an important question about whether healthcare AI will ultimately follow the fast growth trajectory of SaaS or evolve into a more outcome driven investment category altogether, because the measured pace could actually work in the ecosystem's favor. Having said that, we discussed, you also mentioned about the role of Indian government. Niti Aayog, a public policy think tank linked to the Indian government, has been testing the application of AI in primary care for early detection of diabetes complications, and is currently validating the use of AI as a screening tool in eye care by comparing its diagnostic accuracy with that of retina specialists. So, can you share some examples of startups or technologies that are already demonstrating the real ROI through AI adoption in India specifically?
Yeah, a few of them, some from our portfolio itself. So we have Cure.ai, which is basically, which has mentioned 19 US FDA approvals across X-rays, chest CT, and head CT. And they're doing some great work across tuberculosis. As you know, 28% of the TB burden is in India. So this is an autonomous solution which basically can be deployed in remote places very easily to essentially profile the TB patient, which essentially helps us to then take the necessary action. So given that we are short on doctor availability, I think this is a huge benefit. Then of course, on the lung cancer side, of course, we are again finding a huge use case because of incidental finding of lung nodules on a chest X, which essentially in certain cases could be a life savior. And they have found great commercial traction across public health, global health, and with pharma players. And on top of it, they've essentially now taken those solutions to lead to higher efficiency in workflow management and also in terms of radiologist and provider efficiency. So I think all of this combined is essentially is highlighting a successful case study of a AI company from India and has taken the solution from India to over 100 plus countries. Similarly, we see Visa, which is again in AI mental health, also successfully building this out across global health, employer wellness solution for their employees space, as well as in the phygital space of behavior management. So we think again, so you have to essentially find how you build out some of these use cases successfully, and how do you essentially build some of these solutions for scale, and then replicate that across, both from a geography perspective and also in terms of deepening your presence across some of those solutions. So I think that's another example. And then Healthify also, which is an AI virtual coach for nutrition and lifestyle management, layered with human coaches, has scaled to millions of users, driven by strong subscriptions, and their AI layer helps them to reduce marginal coaching cost and improves engagement and retention, driving better unit economics. So we've seen some of these examples of AI companies essentially successfully leading the way. We have another company called CureSkin, which is in the dermatology space, again taking those imaging analysis to provide therapeutic advice to dermatology patients and then serving them in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So I think we are seeing how some of these solutions are essentially solving for both affordability and accessibility at the same time, and in the process, essentially providing better quality of care to patients.
Thank you for sharing those examples, Ajay. And I think what really stands out is that AI in India is clearly moving beyond experimentation into some measurable business impact. Because for a very long time, AI conversations were centered around potential and promise. But now we are seeing organizations actually quantify outcomes, whether that's cost optimization, operational efficiency, faster decision making, or entirely a new revenue streams. I think while the private companies and startup and public companies are also working together to ensure that AI boom Indian healthcare landscape, I also feel that government also plays a very important role, and there should be effective collaboration between the government, the private sector, and even the academia to support responsible deployment, scaling, or skill development in order to ensure a very inclusive growth. Government initiatives and regulations often lag behind innovation. Overall, that's been an overall a global scenario. What policy changes or frameworks do you think would most accelerate AI investment and adoption in Indian healthcare?
Yeah, I think government has a big role to play here. A few points from my end would be we need to have clearer reimbursement and procurement framework. If you have explicit guidelines for including AI-enabled services in government and insurer reimbursement schemes, uh, and we have better procurement templates for public hospitals, this should materially shorten the sales cycles for some of the solutions getting built out. So this is the payer pathway should be very clear, and I think that could be a big game changer. Besides this, we need to have clear approval and benchmarking methodology. So nationally accepted performance and safety benchmarks should be there, and the transparent evaluation processes for AI tools, so that the providers, insurance, and the ecosystem knows what is approved and what is trusted. So I think that's very important. And then I think on the data governance and access side, operationalizing secure privacy preserving mechanism for startups and researchers to access de-identified public health data will enforce strong guardrails to essentially leverage that into building great solutions. And then on top of it, we should encourage sandbox and pilots and regulatory sandboxes where startups can run controlled pilots with state health systems and shorten the evidence generation time, will de-risk the deployment from some of these startups. And I think lastly, workforce enablement, which is that we should have the curriculum and training program for clinicians, administrators, and regulators on AI literacy and evaluation, so that adoption is not hindered by any misunderstanding. So I think this is very important for a large scale adoption. You essentially need the skilled workforce would essentially assess and execute some of these AI technologies successfully. So it's important that the ecosystem is enlightened on the same. So I think these would be some of the measures that would reduce regulatory uncertainty and also, which is a key barrier for investors, especially in a clinically sensitive AI application.
Definitely, Ajay. I think India's strategic focus on AI and its robust healthcare growth paints an inspiring picture for the future. With the right investment, policies, and collaborations, India is not just adopting AI in healthcare, but leading its application for a healthier tomorrow. And I think India's measured adoption of this technology can enable it to bridge rural urban disparities without leaving anyone behind, while becoming a leader among other emerging markets on the road to meeting the sustainable development goals. Well, thank you so much, Ajay, for taking out the time and effort to be on a podcast today and helping us understand that the vision for the future of AI in Indian healthcare is one of profound optimism and innovation. And as technology continues to evolve, AI stands poised to radically transform healthcare in India, making it more individual centric, personalized, accessible, and efficient. And in the coming years, we all envision AI playing a pivotal role in preventive healthcare with advanced analytics identifying potential health risks at an early stage and enabling timely interventions. Thank you so much, Ajay, for your insights. It was lovely chatting with you.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. So, this is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around the role of AI in healthcare investing and what growth we can expect in a country like India. And I think embracing a future where AI operates ethically and inclusively, the Indian healthcare sector can transform these challenges into opportunities, ultimately realizing a vision of a comprehensive and technologically advanced, equitable healthcare for all. Stay tuned for upcoming podcasts, and you can view all our previous episodes on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.